Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Whoa, what a game. I'm going to tell you why it was more improbable than the Minneapolis Miracle.
Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk, just booking my flight to Glendale, Arizona, February 12th, and done. Got it.
Tom Schreier, zonecoverage.com. I did prepare for this show. Can't promise I'm going to say anything insightful.
And I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and I still have absolutely no idea what to make of that game.
Tom Schreier pinch hits for Arif Hassan today on an epic edition of the Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your guys hanging out talking next-level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hassan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota Football Party. And it starts now.
Unbelievable football game yesterday. We are all, I think, still in shock. I can't wait for the next hour to break this thing down. We've got Luke Inman of Superior Sports Talk. Check out his show this morning. He and I rapped about this game for about a half hour. Check out the Locked On Vikings postcast with myself and Luke Braun yesterday in the immediate aftermath. And check out Tom Schreier's work at zonecoverage.com. He was on the ground in Buffalo covering yesterday's game in the snow globe at Highmark Stadium. And Tom, you're the guest. You were on site, so we give you the first word. I want you to paint me the picture of the press box, and I assume the adjacent crowd. What was it like in the closing minutes of that football game?
It's so it's one of those press boxes where you're like in the crowd. Philadelphia's a little like that. Some of them you're pretty high up and pretty away from the actual stands. So there were people turning around, and again, I don't know if they know, like, you know, the Minnesota contingent is there or whatever, but kind of turning around, kind of jeering at the media. You definitely could feel, like, in those big moments, they're stomping on the ground and stuff like that. You can feel the vibrations of that, even with the glass and kind of the soundproofing in the loudest moments, in the moments you can imagine where the fans are really into it. It's enough to kind of drill into your brain and make you want to leave, I guess, when you're just staring there trying to figure out what's going on the other side of the field or whatever. But to go from that to like an absence of noise, obviously you talk about the end of the game, the pick with Peterson, but even that weird play where like the crowd is like, they stop Kirk Cousins on like the half foot line or whatever that was, to go from that euphoria where the Bills players are pumping them up to this play that's, especially because I was looking at the other end zone where Allen fumbled and Kendricks grabbed the ball. But even if you were right on top of that, that was an alert play by Kendricks. I don't know how a fan would have seen that. You feel the devastation. Like the Bills are kind of brethren to the Vikings, right? You talk about 4 Super Bowl losses, cold weather city, diehard fans. Part of me was like, oh, I know what that moment feels like. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, like, you feel it ripple throughout the crowd. This is not, you can go to Arizona or Miami or certain locations. Braun, you could probably talk about that games in LA and stuff. Like, there's games where there's tons of purple and a big presence for the Vikings. There were Vikings fans there. It was a pretty minimal amount of that crowd. It's crazy to go from like, my head hurts, it's so loud in here, I'm feeling the vibrations over, and stomping their feet, to like dead silence and misery. And you felt every part of it at that stadium.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I felt the same way covering the playoff game in New Orleans a few years ago. I want to get Luke and Luke's perspective on how they reacted in that moment. Today's show is brought to you by betonline.net, where the game starts. Get all the lines, all the sports, all the games at your number one source for sports wagering info. Coming up, we're going to have evaluation of the Vikings' defensive performance in this game. We're going to look at the key plays that decided it and some of the subtle plays that you might have overlooked along the way. We're also going to talk about injuries and update our gambling picks. Luke Inman, paint me the picture You're watching the game. Where are you watching? How are you reacting as you see this craziness unfold?
Yeah, we got to enjoy that experience over at Tom's Watch Bar, which if you haven't been to, I think there's a couple new locations, Denver, Vegas. It's basically B-dubs on steroids though, right? I mean, it's just it's like the Mall of America of sports bars. It's insane. That was my first time being there. I was absolutely wowed at that place. Such a great atmosphere to watch that game, but just the swings of emotions, that place erupted. It was electric, people doing gritties, similar to when I was at the Minneapolis Miracle. You are now at the end of that game high-fiving and hugging strangers that 5 seconds prior you had never met in your life. I mean, it just brought everybody together like that. And I think anytime you experience something that so many swings and ranges of emotion, and then you end up on the right side of things, you kind of wake up the next day thinking, was that real? Like, pinch me. Did I dream that? I think we're all still trying to process like what exactly happened yesterday. And much like the Miracle game and others, despite like the instant bliss we all have today right now, I don't think people are going to truly comprehend the magnitude of all the things that took place and the fact the Vikings will now be on the right side of what should go down as one of the greatest games to ever take place in NFL history. So just in the processing stage right now, trying to digest it all. And with everything that happened, I mean, we'll do our best today during this hour, but that could take weeks, if not months.
You wish you could bottle the euphoria and just relive it again, because it was so cool to watch that football game, whether you're a Vikings fan, neutral fan, even Bills fans went through the gamut. Luke Braun, what was your perspective?
I mean, they're going to vacate this, right? It's too improbable. It was simply too... So they're going to take the win away, right? They have to. Like, fair, right?
Somebody was on drugs.
It's insane.
Someone was on steroids.
You will never again in your life see a team trailing by 4, their opponent has the ball with under a minute, and you don't have enough timeouts to stop the clock. You will never see a team win a game from that spot again in your life. Like, it had to be specifically that it was a 4th and goal that gave them the ball without enough room to kneel down, so they had to try to actually snap it. But I guess even if it was a kneel down, it was a botched snap, which you have to execute on a kneel down anyways. You'll never see it again in your life. Like, savor this. It's unreal. And like, to me, that's the most improbable moment. But I did a whole thing on Locked On Vikings this morning about like all of that, like that improbable moment aside, this game came down to kind of who made more plays, and the Vikings just made one more play than the Bills did, and that's kind of the end of it. So I don't want it to take away from the Vikings. It's just astounding how improbable that is.
Yeah, and I did some digging on that last night. So the Pro Football Reference data goes back to 1994. No team has ever fumbled inside their own 10, resulting in a score in the 28 years of data. Like, within that time frame, it's never happened within the last minute of a game. I even extended it out inside your own 20 in the last 2 minutes. And it's only happened one time. Mitch Trubisky got stripped a couple of years ago in a game against the Lions. Of course, it was Trubisky. But this time,
the Lions.
Yeah. Bears Lions. Classic.
Watched. And ironically, they played yesterday. But this is the type of thing that just does. This is miracle at the Meadowlands kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That was the last time, I think, that in the last minute of a game, a fumble recovery like changed the lead. That was 44 years ago. And I was describing this to my wife yesterday. I said, you know how when they talk about natural disasters, they say, that was a 1 in 50-year storm right there. That was a 1 in 50-year game. Stuff happened that does not happen ever. And there's a few different plays that you could say that about. So the play in the end zone was like one of a kind. May never happen again. May take another 100 years of NFL to have that exact scenario. The catch by Jefferson, we see a lot of catches, that are elite every week. And the fact that this just stands among them to such a degree, Tom, I mean, it feels like this will be considered sort of the next OBJ catch. We've been talking about OBJ as the gold standard for almost a decade now, and this might replace that in the lexicon when we talk about elite catches.
Yeah, be OBJ if he had a defender behind him. You know, like that's it. I think he kind of stole the ball. I think it was Cam Lewis or whatever. I get, you know, like the Bills fans as they were leaving or whatever, like we're missing 4 Pro Bowlers. Look at the depth in the secondary or whatever. I guess the Vikings could kind of say the same thing. Look at like what happens when you take away Dantzler and you take away Evans, who I think has been really impressive. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, when you're thinking greatest catch, I actually was thinking in like Vikings lore, like, is this, it has to be better than Greg Lewis. It's obviously like a more high profile player. I get like where the team was in that instance and like Favre had come and like, you know, what the expectations were for the Niners that year and stuff. I think it's hard to compare context, but like, this is huge. I mean, this is, when it was 27-10, and you know, as a writer, you start kind of thinking in the second half where you're going with this. I was like, oh, this is where the Vikings kind of all their marginal victories catch up to them. Like they go play a good team that's hungry after a loss to the Jets, that has all this energy that Allen comes in with that UCL injury, which would put out a pitcher, right? Like comes out of the tunnel, so much energy in his home stadium. And like, this is where it catches up to him. The fact that they overcame that deficit at all and got to this point, and that catch on 4th and 19 or whatever it was, huge play. So given the context, given the magnitude, how hard that catch was, I mean, it's incredible. I know people are hesitant to compare Moss, but it's like, Justin Jefferson can put himself in that conversation if he does this. He came out and said this week, he's like, they wanted me to replace Diggs. I went out and replaced Diggs. He's continued to say when he made that catch, the triple team catch against Arizona, he's telling Kirk, throw me the ball, I'll catch anything. And by the way, it looks like he will. Kirk just threw the ball in his general direction. He went up and caught a ball and with one hand took it away from the two hands of the defender. I don't know. It was an immaculate catch.
Yeah. Luke and Luke, what would have been the number one catch in Vikings history from a difficulty standpoint before that one? Because I think Ahmad Rashad, you know, certainly a Hail Mary catch in 1980, Stephon Diggs, Minneapolis Miracle, but like the difficulty of those catches was not close to what Jefferson did. So I'm trying to think, was there a Moss or a Carter or maybe even Greg Lewis? What was the number one catch before yesterday?
Yeah, those are the two that come to mind first off, but you're right. Difficulty of the actual catch, maybe not on par with what Jefferson did. I think Moss leaping over Charles Woodson, one-handed on the sideline. Chris Carter, how many one-handed catches did he make diving out of bounds, tiptoeing, and gets his feet in for a first down? That Moss one over Woodson at home in the Metrodome versus the Oakland Raiders at the time, that one comes to mind. But, you know, if we went through the all the Moss files, I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but that one always comes to mind as far as difficulty goes for me.
Braun, you're a historian. What do you think?
There's got to be a handful of Moss ones just sort of like rumbling around, like Moss and Carter ones. The Ahmad Rashad one is interesting because it was functionally a tip drill. So I don't like, is that harder? It takes a certain amount of reflex and processing. It's a way different thing. But like physically, what Jefferson did is about the maximum that a human can be capable of. Like, I don't know how you do something harder than that. He went up with one hand and stole a ball away from, I mean, not an Instagram user. That's a NFL player who I would imagine has pretty strong hands, and took it with one arm. And then he, like, as he went down, like he palmed it like a basketball player. And that Bills defender had two hands, like trying to swat it out, and he couldn't. That's superhuman. I mean, that's exiting space and time.
Physics. Like when we watched the replay, for me, like it defied physics how that ball did not touch the ground. And I almost think without the defender there, kind of cradling and almost pinching the ball between the two, he doesn't come down with that. Like just from sheer physics, that ball has to touch the ground at some point. Unbelievable.
Yeah. I want to give
Braun, I was just real quick. I was half ready for Braun, who's done this whole history on the Vikings, to be like Sammy White in 1981, and we don't just boom.
I don't have one off the
Week
top
7,
of my head.
October 18th. It was a night game. West Coast. Sammy White, 3rd and 3. No, you know what though?
The defensive back was
somebody
5'7" Bobby White Shoes Johnson.
Yeah. I think it was Luke in his postgame yesterday said it perfectly. Like, that's a catch that's going to be put on posters for decades to come. You'll see it hanging in your kids' bedrooms for generations. And again, just given the circumstances, the down and distance, the game on the line, Kirk was just sacked on back-to-back plays. Now it's 4th and 18. Kirk, just throw a YOLO ball up, will you? Finally listens. I think I can say with the straight face, it's the greatest catch since David Tyree in the Super Bowl. I really do. I honestly do.
Yeah, I think you might be right about that, Luke. I think when you give situational weight to the moment, I think he was competing with Greg Lewis. Like, I think the Greg Lewis catch, for that play to happen with Favre throwing it to win the game, coming from behind, I think that might have been the bar for me. And I think this equals, if not beats that. It wasn't a touchdown catch, but it was a much more impressive catch physically, one-handed, an impossible conversion with a guy draped all over you. And it was one of 9. Luke, you mentioned this on Superior Sports Talk. One of 9 catches Jefferson had with less than a 50% probability of being caught per next gen. We'll get into some more of those Jefferson catches and other big plays in this game after I tell you about betonline.net. Vikings came back and covered yesterday. Not great for my Bills, minus the 3.5 bet, but great for Vikings fans. You can get that line and plenty more and look ahead to the Week 11 lines at betonline.net. It's your source for football betting. That's NFL and college football, plus NBA and NCAA basketball now starting up. And I got an email from BetOnline yesterday. Jimmy Shapiro sends them right to my inbox telling me that the Cowboys are favored by 2 in Minnesota. That's interesting. We'll have to talk about that as well. You can get that line and more at BetOnline, where the game starts. Where do we go next? I want to go to the goal line sequence to end all goal line sequences. So this starts with Jefferson made so many plays. So there was I want to say it was a slant over the middle where Jefferson goes up high and catches it right in the breadbasket. I think it got him down to about the 8. 2 plays later, the Jefferson catch at the goal line that was initially called the touchdown. This sets off the bonkers sequence. First of all, that catch was amazing in itself. Jefferson going down to the ground, cradling it, looked like he scored. From there, false start on the Bills, or offsides on the Bills. Dalvin Cook drops the ball. The Dalvin Cook drop would be all we're talking about, Tom, if the Vikings go on to lose that game, amongst other things. But that would be a gigantic mistake in the game if Minnesota doesn't go on to win it.
Yeah, no, I think this is a bit of a weird Vikings problem that sometimes it's like Cook does something good, right? Like you go back to the game against Washington, it was like a wheel route or whatever. He scored, he catches a touchdown. And going back to the preseason, like we had seen him out wide and thought he had some catching capability, but he was put in a little bit of a tough spot. And I think it's like this, I get where you're going with this. Like he should catch that ball. He's one of the star players. It would have been a narrative had this game not gotten completely out of control at the end. Having said that, it was just a little weird that I was like, sometimes when they'd have something rolling, you're like, wait, why are we going to like Dalvin Cook here or whatever? But yeah, I mean, we're going to forget about so many moments of this game because it felt like it kind of like dragged obviously in the middle, like a lot of Vikings games do, and then just accelerated at the end, right? That last, I mean, I don't know what it is, like 20 minutes or whatever, feels like it happened in 2 because of the lead changes and how many non-traditional plays I guess there were at the end.
Yeah, the NFL posted the quote-unquote crazy ending on YouTube, like uncut, and it was 43 minutes, but it was the last 2 minutes of regulation and overtime. Took 43 minutes. Like that's how long Vikings fans had to sit in torture emotionally. But Luke, Inman, it goes from Jefferson TD wiped away, Cook TD wiped away because he dropped it, and then Kirk looks like he got across the goal line in real time. The replay shows he didn't, but it was basically 3 times where, as a Vikings fan, your heart leaps, you think they've scored, and then to have it taken away, the gut-wrenching nature of what could have been that loss, like with all of those plays right at the goal line.
You hire a Hollywood writer who makes blockbuster movies. I don't think they can write it or script it any more dramatic. Like just the swings, the ebbs and flows during just those final 2 minutes were insane. And not to ruin kind of the flow of this bit and segment, but let's take a step back. There was actually a sequence of 3 drives that took place that are going to get glossed over a little bit here in history that were just as wild, in my opinion. End of third quarter, heading into the fourth. Dalvin sparked some life into the Vikings with that TD they desperately needed. So now all of a sudden you feel like there's a chance, right? Like you've won close games before, you've battled back, fourth quarter comebacks already on the season, down 10, heading into the fourth. It feels manageable. There's a little life. But then Josh Allen, the following drive, 3 massive, heartbreaking, demoralizing third down conversions. 3rd and 15, he finds Diggs for that, at that point, the best one-handed catch of the game.
Amazing.
With that one-handed pluck out of midair, which, again, just another play that's just probably going to get glossed over. Vikings sacked Allen the following second down by Hunter. They force another 3rd and long, 3rd and 16, I think it was. Allen rolls out of Za'Darius Smith's grasp, finds Gabe Davis for like 30 yards, big chunk play. That's 2 heartbreakers. They force another 3rd down. Allen finds Diggs. I think it was on a quick slant for like 15 yards. They get all the way down to the 7, just like that. Poof. 3rd and 2. Allen, I think, incomplete pass. Instead of just taking the points, they elect to go for it. 4th and 2. Allen rolls out again, forces one. It's picked off by Patrick Peterson. He takes it back to like the 35. So after all those 3rd down backbreakers by that defense, Bills come up empty-handed. Very next drive. I'm sure we'll get into the details a little bit, but Kirk O'Chains and the offense converts 2 4th downs, Hockenson and Osborne, and then that scramble and run, 20, 25 yards inside the 5, sets up the C.J. Ham rushing touchdown. But my point is, those 3 drives right there kind of get glossed over as well. Just as important to the outcome of that game as that final goal line sequence in the final 2 minutes. That was just as wild, in my opinion, as the goal line sequence that you brought up too.
High leverage plays galore. That is for sure. Luke Braun, I mean, you can comment on some of those unsung heroes that Luke touched on, and it all leads up to those plays at the goal line, but just the sequence of events. And if you follow the bunny trail, how one thing led to the next, that's what's mind-boggling about this game, of all the things that had to go in the Vikings' favor just to complete that comeback.
And I think maybe the biggest thing that had to go in the Vikings' favor is Kirk Cousins finding a way to make a good game out of this, because he was putting up a stinker. I mean, a couple interceptions that looked real bad. It was a really bad performance up until it wasn't.
Well, to point out, because just to add on to that real quick, we forget that he tripped on his own center, I think twice, right? And one time,
twice. It was Ingram both times. And Ingram tripped once another game, and I'm pretty sure it's the same problem. He's taking the wrong first step on certain run plays, and keeps tangling people up.
Yeah, how the hell is that happening? Also, why is he trips on his own guy? This is the first time, and just throws it back to Cook. And I was like, just swallow that ball. It's so weird that Kirk Cousins, who is so risk averse, like all of a sudden out of nowhere it goes, no, I'm going to be a hero. And it just throws it back to Dalvin Cook.
And he had another lateral later in the game too. That no one's talked about that, but there was like
that was not supposed to be a lateral. I'm pretty sure
that was not supposed to be a lateral.
A forward swing pass.
Heads up, fell on that. There were just a lot of little heads up plays too, along the line that kind of led to all this. If you guys could,
like, all of that happens, and then like how many career-defining throws did Kirk Cousins have after about halfway through the third quarter of this game? I mean, there were so many that were just like absolutely mind-melting rockets. Some of them taking shots, some of them just because of the difficulty of the window he had to hit. Some of them, I mean, just like firing an insane ball to the sideline, 15 yards downfield while getting drilled and not being able to step into it. Like, just awesome play. And like the thing under me, Matt puts up something that says he goes conservative to YOLO. I don't even know how YOLO it is. I mean, the 4th and 18 to Jefferson was very much like, just go get it, please. But so, I mean, some of that is just really accurate and just like finding windows that not a lot of dudes in this league can find. And that's why, like I said it on the postcast, like that's a playoff game. That's what playoff quarterbacks do when they win playoff games, is especially when, hey, you're up against a good team. They're going to give you some licks. They're going to make you make some mistakes. You're going to throw an interception because they're good. You respond to that by pulling something out that's just as good and throwing it right back in their face. That's the kind of game that makes me think, okay, if we get in the postseason, Kirk Cousins might be able to do something here.
Yeah, no, I'm with Luke. There was certainly some articulate nature to some of those throws. He wasn't just blindly closing my eyes. I'm going to throw it as hard as I can to Jefferson and hope for the best. Two things I really noticed, and Sam and I kind of touched on Superior Sports Talk. One, you're seeing now Kirk's trust with JJ throwing balls that under Zimmer specifically on that short leash. Hey, you cannot turn the ball over on this team. That's not the way we're constructed to win. He would never throw. He's thrown it before he's out of his break. He's blanketed, double covered, doesn't matter. That trust really grew yesterday in a big way. And then secondly, Sam brought it up. Normally when Kirk makes those two first horrible interceptions, one to KJ, I'll give him a little bit of a break there. KJ got bumped a little bit, but that second interception, just a head scratcher. Normally he goes to the sideline and he says, all right, that's it. I am not going to be aggressive the rest of the game. I can't make any more mistakes like that. For him to make those throws that Luke mentioned when the game was on the line the way he did after he made those horrible turnovers earlier in the game, that's a new Kirk that we just really haven't seen. And we're all wondering when KOC was brought in, all right, this offense is going to be better. It's going to look funner. It's going to look a little different, more razzle-dazzle. But what's it going to actually do for Kirk Cousins and JJ's, like their development? I think we're starting to see just some little nuances you can't write down on paper or see in the box score that KOC and that relationship between the coach and the quarterback has really helped Kirk Cousins since KOC's been brought in here. So I'm with Luke. Yeah, those throws at the end, man, those weren't just YOLO balls. Those were impressive throws by Kirk Cousins. We just really haven't seen consistently anyways, late in games when the game's on the line, big pressure moments in the past.
Is his mind quieted?
I think you're onto something. I think the other thing is he every player talks about this. He sincerely wants to get other players involved. I thought once Hockenson stepped up, Osborne was kind of the odd man out. He keeps going back to Osborne. You know, like there's some talk of is Thielen fully healthy? He's going to Thielen in big situations, and even going back to Hockenson, he'd be justified in saying, I'm not going to throw the ball anywhere near this guy. I know he's talented. He's been here 4 days, right? And I think instead he saw how he studied. I think he helped him a little bit with the terminology. And Hockenson's turned into this threat. So for how flawed Kirk can be at times, he did turn it around, obviously, in this game. Also continues to, use the other weapons, hopefully to open up Justin Jefferson, because obviously if he just throws to Jefferson every time, someone's going to figure out how to defend him.
I look at Hockenson's stat line here, and no touchdowns, but 7 catches, 45 yards, pretty good. That's a pretty good for just in general. Do the Vikings win both these last 2 weeks? Do the Vikings win either of these 2 games since Hockenson's been here?
No.
Because last week I can almost say for sure I don't think they win that game last week. This week, I know the stat line doesn't wow you like maybe it did last week, especially knowing what Tom mentioned. He was only here for 4 or 5 days. I don't know if they win this game either. I mean, Hockenson, that addition has been so vital for the offense and Kirk Cousins.
Think about this too.
How did the Lions let this happen?
How enamored did they
in
seem?
The division.
Thank you, Detroit. Johnny Munt was occasionally out-snapping Irv Smith. It was like a 50-50 split, and we were thinking, man, they either really dislike Irv Smith or they really love Johnny Munt. And I think it's clearer now. They just were not high on Irv Smith, because Hockenson comes in and suddenly Munt is an afterthought. It's all Hockenson now. And that's after 1 week in the building. And he came up with a gigantic 4th and 6 on that penultimate drive where they pulled within 4 points, which was a big play in the game. And one of many big plays that people will forget about. And one of many players I think that people will forget about. People won't think about Hockenson as a linchpin in this game. Let's go around the circle. Start with Spinman. I know you love to give credit to your unsung heroes. You only get to pick one, because sometimes you pick 5. You only get to pick one. Your number one unsung hero from this one.
There is a lot of them. I tweeted it, I think it was last night. Blake Brandel needs to be put near the top, replacing the number one offensive tackle in the NFL on the road. In that situation, and hold your own against Von Miller and company, just essential to Kirk moving the ball downfield. And this is why, guys like me and Luke, we kind of nerd out on day 3 of the draft and in training camp, who's winning the second and third team battles, because it's like a given. At some point during the season, every team in the league is going to need to call in a backup to step up into the spotlight and fill in. Guys that don't get talked about a lot. You got a 6th-round pick, kind of grinds his way through the practice squad, lingers around, finally makes the 53-man roster, works his way up to the second team. And it was just like yesterday, all that hard work paid off for the guy, and he held his own in just one of the most difficult positions and situations you could probably draw up for on paper. He helped the Vikings be on the right side of history yesterday. So I just can't say enough about Blake Brandel. His performance as Darrisaw went down, those aren't easy shoes to fill. He made the most of his opportunity. And who knows, too, like Darrisaw probably going to be in concussion protocol. He may be starting next week now versus Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. We'll see.
Tom?
Duke Shelley, I didn't know much about him. I know he got elevated. Came up with a big breakup, right? I think it was on Knox in the corner of the end zone. So it might have been pass interference, didn't get called, doesn't matter. I think the fact that he was physical on that play made the breakup, called into action. Good on him.
How about the coach's decision, too, to put in Shelley after Booth got kind of a little burned a little bit there, and then the flag?
Yeah, did we get a...
That's a lot of guts for the coach to be like, all right,
was
let's
that
throw him
just
the
a
guy we
straight
just
hook?
activated.
There's no injury
Booth
or
gave
anything,
up
just
6
hooked
of
him?
7 when targeted with,
And a PI.
with the penalty not included. I was wondering, though, what happened to Chris Boyd? How is Boyd not next on the depth chart?
Right?
Yeah.
Still stealing souls on special teams?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, and honestly, too, that's a good point. Like, I'll have to go back. Maybe Booth was on the field. He's just, for the majority up until that point, he was on that left side of the field. Then you see Duke Shelley at the end after that massive flag, that pass interference call. So I just assumed he wasn't on the field, but I guess we should triple check that. But I think he did just, a straight hook. I think he just got pulled.
Yep.
So amidst all of this chaos and everything that happened in this game, it's very easy to miss, but I'm pretty sure Harrison Phillips had the game of his career. I think
7
he
pressures.
put up career high. Yeah, 7 pressures. What? He was dominating on the interior, and the Bills' run game looked like it was going to be a big problem going in. With that first drive, that first touchdown drive that they put together, that was basically all run game. The run game really dried up after that, and a lot of that is Harrison Phillips being able to occupy those gaps, split double teams. Harrison Phillips went and had his revenge game, which had not much of a revenge game. He left on very amicable terms with Buffalo, but he showed out in his old stomping grounds. And I think in that way where there's not like one play where you go, man, they just don't win that game if Jefferson doesn't make that crazy catch. Totally true. One play that you can point to. Harrison Phillips's impact, I think, spreads out a little bit more across the whole thing. And I don't think they're in a position for those plays to matter without him.
Defensive line, spectacular once again. I mean, and Allen reduces their impact because of the way that he's able to get out of the pocket and make plays. On plays where he was legitimately pressured, he just makes something out of it with his legs. And that's what happens when you play the Bills. Josh Allen is the great eraser. He makes the offensive line mistakes look better. He makes the good coverage moot because he'll run for a first down or he'll buy time and create a first down with his legs. But Za'Darius Smith, we haven't even mentioned. 9 more pressures in this game, and he's playing not on a perfect knee. You know, that's epic stuff. And I think he continues to lead the league in pressures after 9 games. So you got to give a hat tip to him, to Phillips, to Danielle Hunter. And Buffalo doesn't try to run that much in a traditional way. They just scramble with Allen. But I thought the run defense, aside from like the opening drive, was pretty good in this game and made Buffalo one-dimensional, even though they're pretty good when they're one-dimensional. Before we continue, I want to get into some more defensive talking points from this game because there's a lot to chew on there. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. It is insiders covering their local teams, taking you behind the scenes, a daily podcast that you can find on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. You know what? Let's turn this into a 4-minute drill. Matt, you can wheel up the animation. We're going to talk about our takeaways from the Vikings' defensive performance. How do we evaluate it? Matt, go ahead and run it.
Start the clock. It's time to execute the 4-minute drill.
A minute on the clock for each. Luke Inman, we'll start with you. I want your number 1 takeaway from this Vikings defensive performance.
I think you mentioned it. You called him the eraser. I think anyone who gets Josh Allen playing that Josh Allen football, You're going to have a long day trying to stop them. Give credit to the entire defense, battling through, sticking with it, despite all those third down conversions, whether he converted it with his legs, rolling out of the pocket, hitting someone downfield. I thought the Vikings clamped down when they needed to the most. They opened the game, Luke just mentioned it, getting gashed by Singletary in the first quarter. Credit to Ed Donatel, who kind of made some good adjustments mid-game without his best nose tackle, mind you. Credit Harrison Phillips, had the game of his life. And to lose another corner in Evans when you're already down missing Dantzler, to have Booth Jr. get chewed up, and to have the guts to put in the guy you just called up from the practice squad, I thought that was huge. They gave up a lot of yards. They gave up a lot of first downs, a lot of chunk plays. But when they needed to step up the most in crunch time, they did. Veterans on this team stepped up. Patrick Peterson, 2 interceptions in the red zone. Harrison Smith, huge breakup on Stephon Diggs on 3rd and 15. And, of course, Eric Hendricks falling on that ball in the end zone. The veterans on the defense really rallied around everybody and won them that game, I think, in the end.
Tom?
I've been a Donatel defender, I guess, on my end. I think there was some excitement, I guess. First of all, Luke Brown, this is your fault. You wrote about his illusion of complexity on our website. I got super excited because that sounds super cool. Also, like, I was like, you should bring the Vic Fangio scheme. It seems like the right one to bring over or whatever. And I was curious how he was going to go from 3-4 or 4-3, 3-4. Take the Philadelphia game out of there. Not a great performance, at least in the first half. They've held them under 30 points, I think, until this game. Opponents, I was like, the offense should be able to score 30 points. I was more critical of the offense for not scoring enough. My concern here is what happens when you get in late in the game against a player like Allen. Obviously, we're going to forget this because Peterson picked him off in the end zone at the end and they lost the game, but he looked undefendable because he could throw on the run, because he could scramble and improvise, and he has these weapons around him. I understand there was a non-catch over there on the sideline that does influence the end of the game, but I was like, yeah, when like the prevent's in the prevent, I don't know how it prevents anything.
Ron.
Look at that. Timing perfect.
Nailed it. I want to highlight one guy on this, and it's Patrick Peterson. My takeaway from this is that Patrick Peterson can still play. There's a lot of bluster about how old he is and how much slower he is now. And yeah, he is. He's definitely not running the way he ran in 2017. You wouldn't expect him to. But when you don't have a speed advantage as a corner, there are a whole bunch of tools that you can use to still make those plays, and Patrick Peterson clearly can. He talked about after the game, both of those interceptions, those weren't lucky breaks. That wasn't like Taylor Heineke just like serving up a softball to center field that you can just sort of like field and run back. Those were earned interceptions. That first one was a scramble drill. They were in man coverage and he ran his guy out of bounds, which means I know I can freelance now, and he jumped a route. And that second one was even cooler. He knew that the Bills would know what coverage the Vikings were in. He said, yeah, they're going to know that we're in this, and this is how I know they like to attack it, and this is how I'm going to subvert that, and I'm going to get the interception. That game knowledge and still having enough athleticism to cut underneath the ball, to burst on it, to be able to jump a route. I mean, he's not 80. He still has enough athleticism to pay off all of those insights.
Yeah, Brian Baldinger did a good Baldy breakdown on Peterson's performance, highlighting a lot of the stuff that you just talked about, Luke. Is opportunisticness a trait that can be learned? Because, and you can start the clock, by the way. I'm on the clock right now. Because the Vikings are incredibly opportunistic. And I don't know whether that is something that is in their DNA, whether it's something that they are just fortunate to be, whether there's an element of luck to this. But the fact that they keep repeating this, where in the fourth quarters of games, they are able to take the ball away so regularly. I don't know if Ed Donatel can pat himself on the back about that. I don't know who it is that's deciding that, hey, I'm going to make a play now, or if they actually have the mentality that they're going to be more aggressive when they need to be more aggressive. But this seems to be something that this team is good at. And it's such an intangible quality because turnovers are random and they often are, a result of what the other team gives you on a platter. But the Vikings just keep doing it. They turned Buffalo over 4 times yesterday, and they needed all of them. Unfortunately, they didn't capitalize on the fumble return in the first half, which was a huge play potentially in the game. and ended up backfiring on them when they missed on a 4th and 1. But opportunistic. It seems unsustainable, and yet when you get 9 games into a 17-game season, is it unsustainable? Can they keep this up to some extent? Can they do it for another 8 games and then 4 more in the postseason? What am I missing? Help me fill in the blanks from yesterday's game. Let's go this direction. What does it mean big picture now? So you're 8-1. Your lead is still 4.5. And you're half a game behind the Eagles. Do the Eagles feel more catchable now that you've gotten Buffalo out of the way? Braun.
Sure. Yeah, and here's what the big picture thing, and I said this on the postcast too. Really high chance that if the Vikings want to win the Super Bowl, they're going to have to go into Philadelphia and beat the Eagles. That game looks a lot like this one, and this felt like a playoff game to me. Like this felt like 2 really good teams leaving it all out there, going at it. Weather sucks. It's outside. Vikings on the road. Felt like a playoff game. And being able to win that kind of game, it's like sort of proof of concept. But there's also a positioning thing to it, right? You get to get that much closer to clinching the division, which honestly, that's going to be wrapped up by December. And then also it keeps you hot on the Eagles' heels. The Eagles don't get to just run away with the 1 seed and that first round bye. So there's the positioning to it, but I think it's more just like proof of concept. And I think the players feel that, they feel like, yeah, that's a good team and we just went and beat them. What's your excuse now? And if you really want to still say, I think the Vikings are fake, you have to work so much harder now to like bend it over and say, well, they got really lucky this time, except if you ignore all the unlucky things that happened. And also that it was a road game against a contending team. Like you have to thread so many little needles and cherry pick so many little things if you want to disparage this. To me, I guess the phrase proof of concept is what keeps coming to my mind. That's what it means to me as a fan, and to them, I mean, they've always believed in themselves.
KOC basically said it was a proof of concept in his locker room speech that the Vikings posted.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about the 1 seed, is that still attainable? Sure, I guess. But I look at the Philly schedule: Washington tonight, at the Colts, Packers, Titans, Giants, Bears, Cowboys, Saints, Giants. No gimmies in the NFL for sure, but I think all in all, strength of schedule, it's about middle of the pack, maybe leans a little bit easier than difficult. Vikings still have a really tough next 3 games coming up here. It's not so much about the 1 seed. You're likely going to have to go into Philly if you want to go to win the Super Bowl. I think now, like Luke said, proof of concept, it's the belief factor that we can win a game like this outdoor on the roads versus a tough team that can run the ball, that can score a lot of points, that has a great defense. So now you've got that belief factor. And like Luke said,
yeah, and how grateful, Tom, should Vikings fans be that Josh Allen did play? Because if you have that exact same game against Keenum, they say, well, 4 turnovers, but Keenum was the quarterback.
I think the other thing is not just played, but that he played like he did, right? I mean, I'm sure if you like looked at velocity on the ball or something was lost. I just don't know how you have like a UCL injury, don't practice for 3 days, and you're just the same guy you were the week before. But you're right. I mean, I think it's a different tenor if Keenum plays. Let's be honest, that's like really big revenge game factor, right? It's like a game that they should kind of win then, and it's Case Keenum and Stephon Diggs from the miracle, and like there is still some validity to that win. It's a win on the road in a hostile environment against a really good team, and Keenum we know is capable and still had the weapons. I think ultimately, and I guess you guys are kind of getting at this too, the Vikings are just a high wire act. I don't think that's going to change this year. What this confirmed for me is that somehow, and I still don't totally understand this, a team that led for 45 seconds against Detroit, a team that had to come back against Heineke and the Washington Commanders, a team that let Chicago back in. You go through all these games. I don't understand how they basically just beat the Bills kind of the same way. It's a better played game, and I understand there's nuances and differences, but it still was a high wire act that went into overtime that required a fumble in the end zone that Josh Allen fumbled, and this is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, I don't understand how this methodology works. I don't know how they keep winning. Having said that, in the next 3 games here, you're going to get an answer, right? I mean, you're talking the Cowboys, you're talking the understand the Patriots issues. I do wonder how O'Connell will treat Belichick right. We saw McVay, boy genius, gets to the Super Bowl, stares Belichick in the eyes and was like, I'm not messing with that guy, right? And then the Jets who've been good, right? The Jets beat the Bills before this game. So I think, we'll have 3 games here. We'll get an answer pretty quick, but who knows? For all we know, this is a game that they can win situationally. They're well coached. I think it goes back to O'Connell too. We know Zimmer under pressure, really an intense guy. I think there's something to having a guy on the sidelines who's a little more relaxed, who wants these guys to play with a quieted mind, who shows a lot of faith in him. I noticed O'Connell as he came out to the podium. This is pretty well after he's had a cool down period after giving his speech. Rings around his eyes, a little blurry. I mean, this was emotional for him. So it's not as that though he's not invested. I just think he's kind of had this relaxed atmosphere, and I think it taps into something good with these players. So until they prove us wrong, I guess this works. You can keep winning games at the margins.
Just had his 4th kid too, right? Like 6 days ago, something like that. So he's been through the ringer, man. But speaking of playoff pictures, just real quick here, I know we're wrapping up, but I just mentioned, okay, the Eagles have a pretty easy road. They should be the 1 seed. The Giants are 7-2. They're kind of breathing down their neck. They still have to play the Giants twice. If the Giants were to somehow sweep the Eagles, all of a sudden, that whole division and then the whole seeding looks completely different as well. And the Giants play the Lions next week. That should be a win. They play Washington twice still. So the Giants have a pretty easy schedule coming up too. So I know everybody, including myself, is just wrapping it up with the bow. The number 1 seed goes to Philly, but it's a long way from over. I mean, there's still a lot of football left to be played.
You're absolutely right. And the Eagles do have the tiebreaker, which hurts the Vikings' case. But if the Cowboys can do them a solid, if the Giants can do them a solid, and you never know what's going to happen in Philadelphia or Minnesota for that matter, with regard to injuries. If a key player or 2 is out for a stretch, that can completely impact the way the final 2 months goes. So why is Dallas favored on Sunday? I think I would have understood this before yesterday's results. I think I would have. But
I know you guys are actual gambling
ahead,
experts. Can I throw my non-expert? So what I think happens, and again, you guys can tell me I'm wrong, is that when it's Cowboys, Lakers, Yankees, like these marquee teams, Duke, whatever, like so many people gamble on them that it like screws with the lines. Like they kind of have to adjust for like the irrationally confident fan. Otherwise I just don't understand how the Cowboys coming off a loss are favored in this game. Like it feels like if there's any time to kind of respect what the Vikings are doing, it's coming off a win in Buffalo.
It's the come down effect. It's exactly what happened in Philly after the Minneapolis Miracle. There's something to be said about winning such an emotional roller coaster game and then coming back the next week and giving 100%. Meanwhile, the Cowboys are going to come back hungry, coming off that tough loss in Lambeau. They're going to be fighting. Luke, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that has something to do with it. Because you're right, Sam. I'm with you. I saw that. I go, what? 2 points? Dogs at home? Coming off that win,
Pick'em would have made sense.
That's the only thing I can think of. There is something to be said. There's some truth about that come down factor the next week following that big emotional win.
Yeah, I'm with Sam. I thought it would be a pick'em. But throughout the entire season, if you look at like the projection models, like the 538s or whatever, PFF models and stuff, it's kind of always been higher on the Cowboys than the Vikings. So I wonder if that's still, there is just this sort of genuine idea that is popular, especially among like bettors and the sharps and the markets and all that no, the Cowboys are just a better team than the Vikings. And look, Cowboys are good. They got this Micah Parsons thing going on. Dak Prescott's back. They're cooking. They're humming. They're, like you said, they're in the race for the NFC East, even though Philly's running away with everything. Like they're still keeping up there and it's not over like it is in the NFC North. So respect to the Cowboys. I think the market just thinks they're a better team than the Vikings. And hey, if you think they're wrong about that, go to Bet Online. Put a buck on it.
The analytics might suggest that, and the Cowboys defense might suggest that they are a really good team. And, they and Buffalo are probably, kindred spirits here at 6-3. They probably have much greater aspirations than being like the 6th seed in their respective conferences. And they very well could make playoff runs. But they lose a coin flip game to Green Bay. Bills lose a coin flip game to Minnesota yesterday. Our final segment of every show is Party Fouls, where we talk about the biggest blunders of the week. Let's get into it.
It's time to tell you who spilled their proverbial drink on the sofa. Get ready for this week's party foul.
Mine will be game related. And a couple different ways you could go with this. I'm going to say the lack of Booth review, and no, not Andrew Booth. The lack of Booth review on the Gabe Davis catch. I was curious. That was a terrible pun. I regretted it instantly.
Yeah,
too big a play.
Just kind of mind-boggling considering you've got a dedicated guy for this, right? The NFL hires somebody to count 12 men on the field. And I didn't believe it. I thought it was photoshopped. I saw it on Twitter after the game. But 5:17 in overtime, 1st and goal at the 2. Bills had 12 defenders on the field. They tackle Cook for a 3-yard loss. How does nobody see that? How does that not get called? It just kind of adds to the plethora of already missed calls that the Vikings had to deal with. 12 men on the field, that should just be so obvious. So party foul on the officials there, Sam. I'm with you. That one's tough.
Horse collar
and
was
that's
questionable. The holding on Darisaw was questionable.
Yeah.
The non-call on Hockenson, non-call on JJ. You could rattle off a good half dozen.
Yeah. That's why the pass interference in the end zone with the Duke Shelley plays, like we were owed. We were owed more than that,
totally.
Honestly.
Makeup call.
Oh, damn it.
Sure.
Yep.
I'm gonna call a party foul on myself. I don't know. Am I allowed to do that? It's quite literally a party foul. Went to the game. We all know about Buffalo Bills fans, them jumping through the flaming tables, dizzy bat, and running into a bus. I'm sure you guys have seen that one. These guys party hard, and it's not. There are certain lots that are like further away from the stadium. I think they're independently owned, where things get even more. They don't let the Ubers anywhere near the stadium, so I could barely see the lights as I was getting out of the Uber. I'm sure it looked like I got dropped off at the wrong spot. I looked ready for the airport, buttoned down, as square as can be, little half zip, carrying my bag because I was taking the flight out that night, backpack, credential, little bit of a target, stood out a little bit, especially when it's literally just all, blue and red Buffalo Bills fans. I had to look like the biggest goober, like on planet Earth, like trying to carry my bags through all that stuff. Yeah, had a sweat going, even though it was like 43 and drizzling out.
You lost, man. I don't think you're supposed to be here, sir. If you're going to come within this 100 yards, you need to sign this waiver immediately.
There's a great SNL sketch from last week of Jets tailgaters just having Tom's dead. Jets tailgaters just having like these benign conversations about school and work and their kids. But then whenever someone from the opposing team walks by, in this case Buffalo, in the sketch it was Buffalo, they keep absolutely nailing these fans with trash talk, and the fans that come by are progressively more and more vulnerable. Like it goes from like adults to kids to like people in wheelchairs, and they're just absolutely torching them.
I think that's what it's like to go to a night game at the Link.
Yeah, because that Vikings game was at night. You could get in at 5:30. I was at the door at 5:30, and there still were drunk fans messing with me. But the Bills one, I was kind of half tempted to see it. I showed up a little later than I intended. I thought the Uber would get me in a little bit closer. More than anything, I was like half tempted to like just jump through a table and live it up a little bit. Just went in Buffalo. Bucket
list, got to do it once. Did the Vikings fans travel well from what you saw, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, there were still Vikings fans out there. The Sun Country added an extra flight. Our whole flight was filled with Vikings fans, with the exception of like 3 Bills fans who just kind of wrote it out, especially after that loss. But I would say, like, for the context, I mean, you can't, like, without that Sun Country flight that they added late, you have to fly through like Chicago, Detroit, or even like Charlotte or something to get out there. So it's not really like a convenient route. And I was saying before, I mean, I think some of these places, you go to Arizona, Florida, or whatever, LA, you just have Minnesota people who are there, and then that many more people going, hey, I want to see a little sunshine. It's been dark and gray for like 14 days straight here or whatever. So it's just not the environment you would find like with that Arizona game or whatever. It was definitely more Bills fans than anything else, but you could see purple in there. And as far as like away fans go, I mean, Luke, you remember the Kansas City fans? I think they were great.
Oh yeah.
Certain fan bases, I think they welcome you in and want you to enjoy it. Philadelphia is not like that, right? And this is more on the Kansas City Philadelphia scale. This is more Kansas City. I think people in Buffalo generally pretty nice. It's very close to Canada. Bat out there. I think a bit of the Canada nice out there or whatever. So to my knowledge, for the people I talked to, they love the experience of being a Vikings fan there. Having said that, they were a distinct minority. It was mostly blue in that stadium.
Thursday's show will include an appearance from Ron Johnson. We'll see if he has anything to rip Luke Braun for this week. I feel like that was a good discourse last week, though. We patched up a lot of issues. You each have respect for each other. Nobody's upset. I think that we're kumbaya around the Thanksgiving season. I think that's how it should be.
We'll see what he has to say about my personal life and relationships on Thursday.
He has gotten personal.
Did you get cyberbullied?
Yeah, no,
what happened?
He went
I missed
there.
it. Are you all right?
No, I just got real bullied. Which is,
I mean, got straight up bullied. Oh.
I mean, Arif was here, so
at least he has the guts to do it to your face and not, hide behind a keyboard.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, no. All's fair in love and war.
That means he respects.
It's a free country.
Okay. Yeah.
Tom Schreier at tschreier3, zonecoverage.com. Thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, thank you. There's Luke and you can lose my voice.
Luke and Luke. You can find Inman on Superior Sports Talk. You can find Braun on Locked On Vikings and the Locked On Vikings postcast, and find me on the Ron Johnson Show and on Twitter at Sam Ekstrom. Thanks so much for joining us. That was a crazy game. This is Locked On Sports Minnesota, free and available. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Download the app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and check out all the rest of our shows as well. Like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube video. For Luke, and Tom, I'm Sam. So long on the Minnesota Football Party.